very interesting today. Some of you are going to be intrigued because you're just interested. Some of you are going to be intrigued because you are concerned. I'm talking to former senior intelligence official and whistleblower, Luis Elizondo, and award-winning writer, producer, and journalist Bryce Zabel, who exposed the secrets hidden in government reports about unidentified aerial phenomena, UAP, also known as UFOs. From the Pentagon's Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program, AATIP, to legislation spearheaded by Chuck Schumer and Marco Rubio referencing non-human intelligence, they both unravel explosive claims of recovered alien technology, biological specimens, and Navy pilot videos of seemingly impossible maneuvers. Now, as drones and covert operations raise questions about national security, Elizondo and Zabel shed light on the growing transparency movement and ask the ultimate question: what does the government really know, and why isn't it telling us? Gentlemen, thank you both for joining me. Everybody now knows who you guys are, and I am sure leaning forward into this subject matter. You know, I used to think and comment on this as, I would say, a healthy degree of skepticism. My biggest concern was that every time I saw someone on camera talking about this, he was somebody in a dirty gimme cap. But of late, we have seen very sophisticated aviators. We have seen military pilots reporting very interesting and unexplainable phenomenon, and we have seen evidence of government reports that suggest that this isn't just somebody that has had their daily 12-pack sitting on a boat somewhere reporting things that, you know, maybe were a bit suspect. I've heard it from much more credible sources, and I have a bias because I kind of want it to be true, because I want to learn more about what's going on in the universe. Louis, let me start with you. You believe that there's a lot more going on than the government is sharing with us. And my first question to you is that true? And why do you think the government is withholding information?
Well, great question, Dr. Phil. First and foremost, to answer your first question, yes, the government has had a long-standing interest in this topic from a national security perspective. There are copious amounts of documentation that establishes this fact going back to 1950, and quite frankly, probably a lot earlier than that. Why this is a concern and has been and continue to be a concern for the United States is simply because it illustrates the fact that we do not have what we call U.S. air domain awareness. After 2000, if you remember the terrible events of 2001 during 9/11, there was this basically reaction by the U.S. government to make sure that it had control of its airspace, what we call air domain awareness. And time again, it's been proven that we simply do not. One can only look back at the recent drone flap over New Jersey, simply 2 months ago, as a very graphic illustration of how we do not have control or cognizance over our U.S. airspace. And so from that perspective, the government has a longstanding interest in the topic of UAP, or more formally known in the vernacular as UFOs. And you're right, Dr. Phil, there's a tremendous amount of testimony now that's coming forward, both behind the green curtain, if you will, and in the open press by whistleblowers. These are trained observers, military personnel, law enforcement personnel, intelligence officers, in some cases, very senior intelligence officers that are all coming out and now having a conversation with the American people and the media about the reality of this topic.
Bryce, do you agree? Does the government know a lot more than they're telling us?
I think that's what the fact trail shows. But, you know, Phil, just from a psychological point of view, I mean, people come up to me all the time because they know I'm interested in this. And they say, do you believe in UFOs? And I say, well, of course I believe in UFOs. They're unidentified, they're flying, and they're objects. The questions really are, who are they? Why are they here? and who's flying them. And so I think we've moved into a new phase that your question suggests, which is, in the old world, it was like, well, are people just making this stuff up? Are they drunk or on drugs, or are they just liars or hoaxers? And that's really the old school way of thinking about it, because now even our government has admitted that this phenomenon is a real one. And you don't have to take my word for it or even lose. I mean, the truth of the matter is, in the U.S. Senate just last year, Senator Chuck Schumer and Senator Mike Rounds, a Democrat and a Republican, two fairly sober individuals, introduced legislation that mentioned the word non-human intelligence 22 times. So I feel like where we're coming to right now, and it's appropriate for you to have skepticism and for your listeners and viewers to have skepticism. But if you start to scratch beneath the surface, as Lou is suggesting, you realize there's documentation, but there's also case after case after case, and good cases, not people seeing dancing lights in the sky from a distance, but craft and other things. So yeah, I think Lou is correct. We are entering a new period where the government itself seems to be leading in the direction of, let's talk about this and let's see what's really going on.
Does the government have alien technology, biological specimens? I mean, do they have stuff that is not of this planet? I mean, do they have things that there is no trail, no evidence, nothing that can be traced to anything that we know of on this planet? It doesn't mean that it might not be of this planet. We haven't discovered it yet, but somebody has. I mean, do they have this evidence and they're not sharing it with the public? Louis, what do you know that I don't know?
Sure. Well, let me, if I can, just as a disclaimer here, I still have my security clearance with the United States government. And so because of that, I am still held by my non-disclosure agreement. But what I can say is what I've been cleared to say by the Pentagon previously, and that is that the U.S. government is in possession of extremely exotic material of unknown origin. And I can also say, after, by the way, a year of a back and forth dialogue with the Pentagon, I can also say now, without getting into trouble, that biologics or biological specimens and samples were recovered from some of the crashes involving some of this very, very exotic technology. This conversation is dynamic. It's ongoing right now. There's a lot of people, both at the Pentagon and at the CIA and within our intelligence community, that are trying to figure out how to have this conversation with the American people. Why is that? It's because it's been over 70 years of misinformation that has been put out. And now the government finds itself in a situation where it has to basically unwind that tape. Despite telling the American people that there's nothing to see here, it turns out that there was quite a bit to see. And this sense of stigma and taboo, which, as you mentioned yourself, Phil, in the beginning, has tended to relegated this conversation to kind of the backwaters of fringe conspiracies. And it turned out that it's actually very, very true.
Let's give a case. Lou knows many cases. And again, he is not allowed to speak about them under his NDAs, et cetera. But let's face it, I think you alluded to it. There is work that's been done, but the government hasn't been showing its work. And we can look forward to a time when we possibly don't need the government to show its work, that we'll have the technology to reveal this secret to ourselves. But make no mistake, there are many, many videos, many photos, and possibly craft and bodies out there that the government has had and had for a long time. And I'll give you one case that your audience has certainly heard about, and that's Roswell. And we've been encouraged to think about that one as, that's just a TV series with kids in it or something. It's just not a serious thing, but it's very serious. In 1947, when Roswell occurred, the Roswell Army Air Base at that time was the only nuclear bomber base, not only in the United States, but in the entire world. And if you talk to the researchers who have gone to the Roswell area and talked to witnesses over the years, there are some 600 witnesses to different aspects of how they handled that material. And they handled it with such care, with such extraordinary secrecy, that you'd have to say, if it really was a weather balloon, who would do that? I mean, no one on their deathbed confessed to it was really a weather balloon. But a lot of people have talked about how the Roswell case was a real thing. And that includes Apollo astronauts who have said it. Edward Mitchell said it. And he was the pilot of Apollo 14, and he grew up in Roswell. So that's just one case. There are many others. But I think we're entering a period where we're going to have to rewrite all the history books because given that such a thing could have occurred, and I believe did occur, then that means the entire history that's gone on since then has been a hidden history.